Okay, so now we're ready to start adding these controls to the frames and also setting them up in such a way that they can receive data from the user or display data to the user. So there's a lot going on here in this technique. Let me start here. I have these, before I create the actual controls and pack them up into their frames, I need to create these string var variables. And these are, I have 4 of them here to correspond to each of these 4 controls. So we have the 3 text boxes and then also this label. That's in what we would call an essential control or an active control, where I'm actually going to be putting data at runtime to display the result to the user. So I've got 4 string var variables to correspond. I've very carefully named them: initial investment, interest rate, number of years, future value, to correspond to these 4 things. So that's part of this. Okay, so just to reiterate though, that's not the controls themselves. It's not the white text boxes that we see or this big wide label that we see. It's just almost like a receptacle to receive the data or work with the data that's going to be in those controls, okay? Not the controls themselves, though. So now we're getting ready to create the controls themselves and pack them into the frames. So these 6 here, these 6 lines of code here, are me creating these 6 controls in the top frame, okay? Let's start with this label here where it says enter initial investment amount. So this is a label. Let me see if I can get that. Okay, so this is a label, right? It belongs to the top frame. And I want the text to say enter initial investment amount. I'm going to set the style to my green, light green T label style that I created a couple of videos ago. And this here, I'm using the grid formation or the grid method to pack. I'm not using the word pack. I mean, we are packing the label into the frame, but I'm using the word grid or the grid method to get that nice, neat layout that we see here. So I'm putting this label into column 1, row 1. Okay, sticky, this relates to where you want the label to like stick to the cell that it's in. You think of like columns and rows. This label is in a cell. If I say sticky equals E, that means it's going to stick to the east, which is the right side of the cell, so to speak. Let me change it to W and you'll see the effect. Okay, do you see that? Now it's stuck to the west or the left side of the cell. So that's the sticky specification. So I just use east for all of these, so they line up nicely on the right side. All those text labels. Okay, so that will get that one into the first cell, so to speak, of the grid. Okay, so now I'm ready to put this entry into the second cell. So now I'm going into column 1. That's the second column. These are zero-based columns. And then row 1, or row 0 still. Okay, so here we go. This is the entry. You see me here, entry. And this is, once again, going into the top frame. For the text box or the entry, I specified a width of 25. I don't think, that's not 25 pixels. It looks like 25 characters. So you can play with that, but I just went with 25. It's more than you would need, obviously, if they're just entering a number. And then now this is an active control, and it corresponds to the initial investment amount that the user is going to enter. And so I have set this text variable property to this guy, the initial investment string variable. So on the active controls, meaning these 3 text boxes or entries, and then the label that displays the result, I am setting that text variable so it corresponds to its string var variable that I created up above. Okay, so it's just a little bit of coordination that is required, and then after that, I mean, things are going to fall into place really nicely. So anyway, again, using grid, I'm in column 1 here, which is the second column, row 0. Okay, so now, I mean, that's really it. So for this next label, once again, it's like the first one. I'm putting it into the top frame. I'm setting the text, setting the style. And then now for the grid, I'm back to column 0, which is the first column, but I'm in row 1, which is the second row. So I'm getting that right in there. Sticky is east, okay, to stick it to the right side of the cell. And then the next entry in line is for the interest rate. This is where the user is going to enter the interest rate. So once again, I'm using entry here. 25 characters, it belongs to the top frame, 25 characters. And then look, the text variable, very carefully setting it to the corresponding interest rate string bar that I created. Okay, and then loading it into the grid at the appropriate row and column, or column and row. And then, yeah, so and then these two, it'll be more of the same, okay? So, with that in mind, so that's the top frame. And notice I did not set the padding on any of these. You know, we had talked about padding and having like some nice margins around the controls. I did not set the padding, but while I was creating those controls, but I did, and your book does this as well. If you have a bunch of controls like all in a grid formation, you can just kind of loop through that formation and set the padding like for all of them uniformly, all in one shot, and that's what I've done here. So for child in the top frame, winfo_children, this is the syntax, you can just configure that, grid_configure, and then I'm just setting the X padding to 5 pixels and the Y padding, meaning the vertical space between the controls, to 10 pixels. Watch what happens if I don't do that. I'm going to comment this out. Okay, you see, if I skip that part where I'm zipping through and setting all the padding for all of those, you can see they're all bunched together. So yeah, you can set the padding in a loop if you want. Or I could have also set the padding as I was creating these, doing the pad X, pad Y in here, something like this. Okay, I could have done it there as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video and then we'll do the bottom frame in the next video.